Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, the Toronto Maple Leafs have signed forward Jarnkrok to a 4-year deal worth $2.1 million per season. The video today is mostly going to be on him, but I also want to look at some other depth signings that the Maple Leafs made, and then talk about what they can do next this offseason. Jarnkrok will be 31 at the start of this season, and if you're looking at his career to this point, he's basically a guy who can chip in with 10 to 15 goals a year and about 30 points or so. But you're not acquiring Jarnkrok to score goals. You're getting him to be a versatile middle six forward who can play both the wing and the center ice position and be defensively responsible without taking very many penalties. Last season for the Seattle Kraken, he spent the majority of his minutes playing on the wing, on a line with Mason Appleton and Yanni Gourde. But around the trade deadline, he was dealt to the Calgary Flames, where he played the majority of his minutes at the center ice position with Dylan Dubé and Blake Coleman. Now, I said that he could play both the wing and the center ice position, but now the example that I'm showing is that he was much better on the wing in Seattle than what he was down the middle in Calgary. But that's just the way that it is with these players sometimes. It depends on their role and the line mates that they have. He's a center the same way that Alex Kerfoot is. It just depends on the role that you're playing him in. But at the very least, he's a winger who takes a lot of faceoffs, and over the last 5 years, he's about 50% on the draw or so. He's one of those guys that if you give a role and a purpose to, he's going to do that one thing extremely well. If you want him to be a dog in on the forecheck and just go scoop pucks out of the corners, he'll do that. If you want him to defend your own blue line and stop guys from getting over it with the puck, he'll do that. If you're looking at where he had the best years of his career, it was on the wing. If you're looking at the line mates that he played with in Nashville, he was almost exclusively on the wing. But like we showed, he's a winger who takes a lot of faceoffs and can win them at a decent rate. The thing to understand about Jarnkrok is that he's a complementary player. He's not going to drive play on his own, but when he is playing on a line with good line mates in the proper role, on the wing for the most part, he is able to be a very, very effective player like he was with the Nashville Predators for years. Jarnkrok's decline last year, going from Nashville to Seattle to Calgary, could be simply explained by he's 30, turning 31, and he just doesn't have it anymore. But at the same time, when the Maple Leafs acquired Mark Giordano from the Seattle Kraken, everyone thought that he was just cooked offensively and wasn't that offensive defenseman anymore. But in 20 games with the Leafs last year, he put up 12 points, which would have put him on pace for about 50 or so over the course of an 82-game season. I'm a huge fan of Calle Jarnkrok at $2.1 million a season, but I'm not a fan of the 4 years for a guy who's going to be 31 in September. But I also understand that the 4-year deal is probably how they got him at the $2.1 million cap hit in the first place. But moving on to the couple of other depth moves that the Maple Leafs made, it was reported the other day that Dubas was looking for a physical right-handed defenseman. And then the Maple Leafs went out and signed Jordie Benn, who shoots left-handed but plays the right side and does fit that description of being a physical defenseman, but they also signed 5'9", 185-pound defenseman Victor Mete as well, both to league minimum contracts. Jordie Benn's numbers over the last couple of seasons aren't the greatest, but for a guy who can play both the left and the right side and do it with a bit of a physical edge, I don't mind him being the 7th or 8th defenseman. And when the Leafs brought in Zach Bogosian a couple of seasons ago, his numbers didn't look all too great either, but he ended up turning out to be a very effective third-pairing defenseman in their system. Aside from Victor Mete being 5'9" and 185 pounds, he's a defenseman who could play both the left and the right side, and he's coming off of a season with the Senators that wasn't the greatest, but previous to that with the Montreal Canadiens, he was a decent third-pairing defenseman who moved the puck effectively, played a little bit on their power play, played a little bit on their penalty kill. And then a lot of people rushed to ask the question, are the Toronto Maple Leafs trading a defenseman? Who could it be? Is it Justin Holl? Is it Jake Muzzin? Is it Rasmus Sandin? But the thing that you need to realize is that the Maple Leafs do this every offseason. They sign about a dozen or so depth guys, they take them into training camp, and then at the end, they place them all on waivers. And whoever clears gets to be good depth for the Toronto Marlies, and whoever gets claimed, well, that's the reason why they signed with Toronto in the first place, to play a training camp where there's a lot of media exposure, so that if they do get placed on waivers, there's a better chance of them getting a job elsewhere. To the point that the Maple Leafs may be trading a defenseman, in order of likelihood, I think it would go Justin Holl, Jake Muzzin, and then Rasmus Sandin, but I wouldn't rule anything out when it comes to Sandin, because on the most recent edition of 32 Thoughts, Friedman says that the Leafs aren't going to be able to get Sandin signed at the same number as Timothy Liljegren, which was $1.4 million a season for 2 years. He said he thinks Sandin sees his value closer to Adam Boqvist, who signed for $2.6 million and 3 seasons. It's a really short list, but here are all of the defensemen in the NHL who are 23 years of age or younger and have signed second contracts, so they're no longer on their entry-level deals for under $4 million. It's Adam Boqvist at $2.6 million, and Ryoki Haru at $2.5 million, Husso Välimäki at $1.55, and then Liljegren at $1.4 million. Ryoki Haru is 23, and he's played over 200 NHL games to this point. That's more than double than what Rasmus Sandin has played. He's just not a comparable. Adam Boqvist has played 128 career games, which is 40 more than Sandin, and he has almost twice as many points. I just don't see either of those two players being comparables for Sandin. And if you're looking at the right side of the blue line for Columbus next season, Boqvist is more than likely going to be playing in their top 4. And Kyle Dubas already said that he prefers Rasmus Sandin playing on the left side. And if you're looking at the left side of the blue line for the Maple Leafs next year, they got Morgan Rielly, Jake Muzzin, and Mark Giordano. So never mind playing top 4 minutes, there's not really top 6 minutes available for him. And it's not that he's not good enough, there's just guys in front of him. And I don't really blame Rasmus Sandin for wanting more money, because if the Maple Leafs can't justify giving it to him, they're likely to trade him. So he's going to go somewhere where there's going to be more minutes available, or the Maple Leafs say, we can't lose this young player, we want to retain him, and they move someone else out, and the minutes open up here for him. Rasmus Sandin is just 22 years old, and he's got loads of potential, and overall, last season in a third pairing role for the Maple Leafs, he was very effective. But when he was asked to play higher up in the lineup against the other team's best players, it didn't go so well. And it's not really fair to criticize him on, because it was only in about a handful or so of games. But when he did play on the right side, it also didn't go so well. The Maple Leafs are at a crossroads with him right now, where they need to decide whether or not he's going to be a top 4 defenseman in the NHL. He's a really good puck mover, and it's a ton of fun to watch him just along the boards in the Maple Leaf zone just avoid opposing players coming in on the forecheck, slipping in and out of pressure. He's really good on his edges, but he doesn't necessarily have that same straight line speed as a guy like Morgan Rielly does, and we've seen him get burned at the offensive blue line a couple of times now, where he either can't turn around fast enough to catch the opposing player, or he's not big enough to stay with him one-on-one. But like I said, he is just 22, and he's got loads of potential. The Maple Leafs have a decision to make. If you remove the players from the Maple Leafs roster who are maybes to make the team at this point, they got about $4 million to re-sign Rasmus Sandin, Pierre Engvall, and get 2 more forwards for that 4th line. Even if Sandin were to sign the same deal that Liljegren did, I don't think that $4 million would be enough to accommodate that, signing Pierre Engvall and then adding 2 more players to this roster. So there must be a trade coming. If you moved out a guy like Justin Holl and Sandin signed for the same money as Timothy Liljegren did, you'd have about $4.5 million to get Pierre Engvall signed and fill out 2 more forward spots. But like we talked about in the previous video, they could move out a guy like Jake Muzzin. He's got a no-trade clause, but a no-trade clause is not the same as a no-move clause, and Ryan McDonough found that out the hard way when they basically said, either accept a trade here, or we're placing you on waivers, and the Blue Jackets are claiming you. In hindsight, after Gaudreau signed there, maybe not the worst place to have gone. Some are even saying that Jarnkrok is going to be Alex Kerfoot's replacement, and if you're comparing the two players, they're kind of similar. They're versatile middle 6 forwards who could play both the wing and the center ice position on the power play, the penalty kill, up in your lineup, down in your lineup, but to be fair, Kerfoot is probably the better version of that player. Jarnkrok's career high in points is 35, and Kerfoot has had more than that 3 times already, and he's coming off of a career best 51 points. But if Jarnkrok was able to fetch a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 7th, going from Seattle to Calgary last year, and Kerfoot is the better version of him, well then the Leafs should get at least that, if not more, for Kerfoot in a deal, and that's kind of exciting. Or they could just trade Justin Holl, like we said earlier, and keep both of those guys and have a ton of flexibility in their middle 6. Or they could even do both, which opens up even more cap space, and then just continue to experiment with the idea of Sandin playing on the right side on that 3rd pair. I mean, if you're looking at who's left on the UFA forward market, there's 2 guys who we talked about in a video a couple of days ago, which I'll leave linked above the screen and at the end of the video if you want to check it out. in Zach Ashton Reese and Sonny Milano that would look really good in the Maple Leafs forward group. Zach Ashton Reese got Selke votes a couple of seasons ago, and last year he was among the league leaders in forwards in hits per 60 minutes. He's just an absolute dog on the forecheck and a relentless player to play against. And Sonny Milano, who spent the majority of last year playing with Trevor Zegras in Anaheim, is a really good two-way player who's a good playmaker and a great skater. Now, the Ducks didn't pick up his $1.8 million qualifying offer, but that's not because he's a bad player. He was also arbitration eligible, and maybe the Ducks were worried about what the arbitrator could have awarded him, and they just decided to move on. But on a one-year, prove-it type deal with the Leafs, maybe it comes in a little bit higher than $1.8 million, but I'm a huge fan of this player at that number. 34 points in 66 games isn't necessarily that exciting, but going from Anaheim, where they didn't really score that much overall, with these underlying results to a team like Toronto, getting the opportunity to play in their top six, he's gonna put up more points. But you're gonna have to let me know what you prefer down in the comment section below. Do you want the Maple Leafs to just trade Justin Holl and then re-sign Pierre Engvall and Rasmus Sandin and fill out that fourth line with a couple of other guys making around league minimum? Or do you want the Maple Leafs to trade Justin Holl and Alex Kerfoot and explore the free agent market a little bit more? One is definitely more exciting than the other, but I don't know. But what I do know is that's going to be it for the video, guys. Make sure to like it if you did like it and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And I'll see you again in the next one.